Have you ever been sewing right in the middle of that perfect seam and bam, your bobbin thread runs out? It is so frustrating. Well, in today's video, I'm going to share what I do to try to prevent this. I'm not always successful, but I put these steps in place to try to prevent this from happening to me regularly. And to make it easy on you, I've put together a free guide that lists all of these steps and tips that you can download in the description below. Now let's dive in. Bobbins are small and have a limited amount of thread that they hold. Did you know that winding your bobbin the correct way can make your bobbin hold more thread and then last longer? So let's go over how to wind it properly, and I'll also give a special tip to make it even hold more. And before we even get to the machine, I want to point out that using high quality thread is really important because cheap thread or old thread can break very easily. So I like Gooderman thread. That's the only thread that I use. So I would definitely recommend getting a good thread and not using something that's too old. So when we want to start winding our bobbin, we're going to put our spool of thread onto the pin. You do want to read your manual and see which way the thread should unwind. Mine unwinds clockwise because I checked my manual, so check yours. And then we're going to put it through the tension disc here and look at your manual how to go do that. For me, I go through there and then I wrap it around that way. So this helps tension. Then I'm going to get my bobbin. You always want to make sure that you have the correct bobbin for your machine. They look very similar, but they are slightly different. The instructions on my machine tells me to bring it up through here, this little hole that's there, make a little tail. And you can see there's this little notch here, and that will fit in. I have a notch in my bobbin as well, so I want to turn it around till that clicks in. I just heard that click in. I'm going to give a little room here. You're going to push it over to here, and this is what's going to identify when the bobbin gets full. So I'm going to just let it spin just a few times here so I can then cut off this little tail. I'm going to cut off the tail. And so this is a good, see how that's very slack. One way to help fill your bobbin even a little bit more, then clip that off, a little bit more than just this tension disc will allow, is to give a little extra tension right here. So I'm just going to hold on to that just gently to give a little extra tension. So that will fill the disc ever so slightly more. As it's filling, you want to make sure that it's going up and down evenly, because sometimes you'll see it's just filling on maybe the top or on the bottom, or it could be getting tangled, so you might not have it threaded properly. So you want to be very careful. I keep a close eye on it as I'm filling it, and then the machine will tell me when it's done filling. It'll stop going. So I'm just very easily, just lightly holding on to this to help fill it up just ever so slightly more. So the more thread we can get on this bobbin, the less fast it will run out. Okay, there it stopped. So I'm just going to cut it here, push it aside, and you can see I have a very nicely filled bobbin. It only goes about maybe 80%. You can see it never is going to fill the whole way. So this looks really great. So now we have the perfectly wound bobbin. So how do we prevent it from running out in the middle of our project? So what I like to do is, before I start a project, I always check how much thread I have in the color that I need. And if it's a larger project, I will typically wind a second one in that color. So now that we have a perfectly wound bobbin, we need to make sure we thread it properly. So in the instance where I start a project, I'm going to check to see how much thread I have in the machine. So you can see this is very little thread. I'm not going to get very far, or if I'm in the beginning of a new long seam, I would be a little concerned with so little thread in my bobbin. This might get me through a reasonable seam, but there's a risk with that. So there's a few things you can do. I can either just take this out. This is pretty good, but if it was slight, let's say it's half of this, I wouldn't want to continue sewing. So I could just use this for some hand sewing. The rest of this thread, I could put it aside and then use it when I'm sewing something by hand. Or I could just use it if I have some series of small stitches or areas, internal areas of the garment that I don't care if I have to start and stop, but I really don't like starting and stopping at like perhaps a hem or a top stitch where you can really see that starting and stopping. So in this instance, I would want to take this out and put a new bobbin in. This is a good way to just always keep an eye on that, your bobbin throughout your project. So in this instance, I'm going to put in the new bobbin that we just threaded. And it is quite important that you look on here to see which is the proper direction to put your bobbin in. So for mine, it goes this way. So the thread unfurls counterclockwise. So I put it in there, and there's a little tiny notch there that I need to bring that across. And for mine, I just bring it into there. And I can put this back on. Now you should read the instructions on your manual because everyone's machine is differently. I do not need to raise the bobbin thread up, but you may need to do that on your machine. I'll show you how to do that because I have the option to doing it, even though I don't have to. So let me get this threaded here, and I will show you how I do that. Okay, so I have this top one threaded. I make sure I bring it underneath the presser foot, and you just turn the hand wheel, and this will loop through the bobbin thread, and you can see it brings it up here. And then I have both of them, and I want to make sure both are underneath the presser foot and pushed to the back. You always want to start with your thread sort of at a 45-degree angle to the back. And the common colors that I use, I like to keep several bobbins pre-wound. So if I'm winding a white or a black, I might wind 2 or 3 at any given time and then just keep them on hand. I have this bobbin cases that I love that I purchased that I can keep my extra bobbin colors in here. And then when I need one, I can easily grab it. The little bucket that I have behind me, I usually just keep an extra white and black in there as well, since I use them so often. I just keep it there instead of trying to put it in here. But keeping it organized is really great for me, so it's not all twisting around when you have them just thrown into a drawer. And beyond just running out in the middle of a project, even worse is running out of bobbin thread in the middle of a seam, particularly a long seam. So before I start a seam, particularly a long one, I'm going to look in my bobbin case, which mine is clear and I can see without even opening it, just to see how much is in there. Then perhaps I will insert a fuller bobbin, or I can judge whether or not I think I have enough to get through the seam. But even worse than that of running out mid-seam is not realizing that you ran out during mid-seam, and I am just sewing a hugely long hem, like maybe in a circle skirt, and I'm sewing along and I'm taking out my pins, and then I get halfway around and I realize that none of it was sewing because I ran out of bobbin thread. So then I have to stop and repin everything and re-sew everything. It always seems to happen when it's sort of a challenging sew, and I was just happy to be done with that seam. So it is really important to try to look before you start any given seam to make sure you have enough bobbin thread, or at least as you're sewing, keep looking. Sometimes I'll look behind to make sure I haven't run out. But inevitably, sometimes I do run out of bobbin thread in the middle of a seam, which is quite frustrating. But what I do is I stop immediately, trim off the upper thread, put the new bobbin thread in, and then start just a few stitches in from the last stitch line so I can lock in that seam and then continue sewing. I don't like to have to do that when I'm particularly doing a hem or a top stitch because it is a little obvious, but in the grand scheme of things, probably it's not that noticeable. If you want to learn more about how to get perfect stitches by avoiding common threading mistakes, check out this video here. And if you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And don't forget to grab the free guide in the link in the description below.